Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm going to start that again. Thanks for joining us for Brad's digital breakout, Playing Chess on a Trampoline, How to Innovate in an Era of Uncertainty. We have a lot of great experts on the line, probably 24 or so, actually. It's a pretty busy panel of experts, so would love to see your questions. Before we get to your questions, I do have a couple of ground rules. First, if you want to ask a question, this is Teams, so you can go ahead and click the chat to ask your questions. We have some moderators that will say, yes, that's a valid question, or no, it's not, and we'll read some of those out loud to be answered out loud on screen, and some of the experts will just type an answer in the chat window. At the end of the session, we'll give you some resources, and throughout the session, if we say a link or we say a resource, we'll actually put that in the chat window as well. Some etiquette: the session may be recorded, so if you don't want your question to be read out loud during the recording, please don't ask it, and you may want to just disconnect. And also help our moderators, don't spam, post inappropriate comments. Pretty much we're asking everyone just to really be an adult and follow the Microsoft Code of Conduct. You can see that here, and it's also already in the chat window. We do have some experts here, and my name is Joe Lurie. I'm your MC today, your host. I'm a senior product manager with Microsoft 365. Two things. One, I focus on deployment and management, and two, I'm probably the least important person on this call. So I'm going to leave it to my experts to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Amit.
Hi, this is Amit Godke. I'm a program manager within the customer experience engineering team.
Thanks, Amit. Danny?
Hi, I'm Danny Guillory. I'm a program manager on the customer acceleration team.
Colleen?
Hi, I'm Colleen Williams. I'm a program manager on the Microsoft Edge team.
Thanks, Colleen. Michael?
Michael. Oh, hey everyone, I'm Michael. I'm a manager in the Intune customer engineering team.
And Chris?
Hey, Chris Jackson. I'm a program manager looking after Windows security and Microsoft Edge as part of our customer engineering team.
Great, and we do have some questions starting to come in. So I'm going to start asking, I'm going to actually start with Danny. Do we know, this is from LPM Automation, do we know when the Configuration Manager client install integration into Autopilot will land in Microsoft Endpoint Manager? Right now, the process is not overly slick.
Yeah, we'll actually be lighting that up pretty soon here right after Ignite, so keep checking the portal. There'll also be some announcements on the what's new in Intune.
Hey, thanks, Danny. Colleen, I'm going to ask you this question that Anonymous has posted. We get a lot of questions from Anonymous. I think Anonymous joined us for a lot of these sessions. Anonymous asks, will the features of Edge on Linux be at parity to the Windows versions at release? Will it include AAD, Azure Active Directory support?
Thanks for the question. I've gotten this question a couple times. So what I love about getting repeated questions is that shows what our documentation needs are for when we do release. So for the dev channel release that we plan for October, we won't be quite at parity, but when we get to stable channel, we are looking at parity. So from an AAD support point of view, I'll have to follow up, but our goal is to be as much at parity as we can by the time we reach the stable channel.
Great, thanks so much for that. Amit, we have a question from Andri. Please share any new features for bring your own device. This is a pretty vague question, open to interpretation. So if you can share any new features on bring your own device, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, right. There are some new features that we are releasing in our MAM scenario, what is also known as the app protection policy scenario that you can look up on what's new section. And then if you're looking at some of our Android and Windows BYOD scenarios, we've got some more new features coming up and lined up in there as well, especially on Android work profile scenarios.
Thanks so much for that. We have another question from Anonymous. Again, Anonymous is going to ask us a lot of questions today. I'm going to ask Michael this one. Do we need to buy Intune licenses to attach Intune to Configuration Manager?
No, definitely not. You can go ahead and start connecting Config Manager to Intune. straight from tenant attach with no additional license requirements. And the benefit of doing so is that you get to see your entire PC estate in a single portal inside of the Intune portal. So definitely recommend that.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I have a question here that I'm going to ask for Chris Jackson. This is from Rob DeRoos. What are the best practices for targeting policies, apps, update rings, and so on? It's something I missed in the documentation. Colleen was mentioning the documentation earlier, so it's nice to see that that might be missing. Chris, what are the best practices for targeting policies, apps, update rings?
Sure. Well, I'm trying to kind of unpack that question and understand exactly what we're asking. So hopefully we'll get to it. I mean, obviously, when we think about, all of the, apps that you have, all of the policies that you have, and all the devices, it's a many-to-many problem. So the first bit of recommendation I see for folks who are kind of getting new to it is make sure that you actually complete the cycle and you get things targeted. I've seen that happen more than once where, hey, we build the policy, we just don't happen to assign it, and therefore it's not making any difference. Because you have, this challenge of making sure that everything gets targeted. But sort of the other half, when you think about update rings, is really thinking through, this process. Number one, I want to get it targeted. But the second one is, hey, what's the right way to roll things out? And, how do I get that representative grouping first? And that, to me, is the most important word, is to make sure that it's actually a proper representative sample of what's happening. So I don't want to, target a 30,000 person environment and hit 10 devices and think, you know what, that's enough. I'm sure that'll be fine. But at the same time, I also don't want to hit half of the entire environment of what that is. I really want to say, what does it take for me to get that coverage, which is something that we've been, continuing to try and build tooling for to help you see how many devices do I have to hit and which ones in order to get a representative sample.
Thanks for unpacking that. I'm going to ask Danny this question because it's one of my favorite questions. And Danny, I think you enjoy it too. This is also from Rob. Will we see Chrome OS support in Endpoint Manager anytime soon? He's actually asking sometime soon, but I'm going to read it as anytime soon.
We're looking into it. I don't have an exact time frame of when that'll land, but we are looking into it.
Yeah, it's a fun question because we're ready for it. When Google gives us that right to support Chrome OS, we are there. We're ready. Everything's in place except for Google's thumbs up. And as soon as we get that thumbs up from Alphabet, we'll go ahead and support that, Rob. Thanks for asking that. Danny, I'm going to ask you this one as well. Would we be continuing Configuration Manager along with MEM, or is there a chance MEM and Intune totally replace Configuration Manager?
That's a good question. So I would encourage you to look at it as using, MEM is a part of, Configuration Manager is a part of MEM. So when you look at MEM, you basically really want to use them together. When you use them together, it's really the quickest way to get to using the cloud and get to additional security, basically adding value to your environment. So when I talk to customers a lot about, hey, how do we get from one to the other? I don't encourage customers to look at it as a or, it's a and. So when you can leverage Configuration Manager and, you get a lot more value. There'll be some other blogs and sessions following up Ignite as well as going into next week. I would encourage you to look at those items. Kind of a prelude, there is what I would constitute as the big three: tenant attach, CMG, as well as co-management. If you use those three, I would say those three are the key to the and scenario and not an or scenario. And that'll help you kind of supercharge your path North Star to the cloud.
Thanks so much. I see a few questions in here about moving from Configuration Manager into Intune, and it's all basically the same. You start with co-management or tenant attach and co-management, start moving workloads over at your pace, or you stay on hybrid as long as you want to stay on hybrid. So it's a good question. We see that a couple of times in here. All right, let's go on to the next question. I see our SMEs, our experts are answering questions so fast. Sometimes as I'm asking it, it's already being answered. So let me see if I can find one that has not been answered yet. I have a question. I'm going to ask Michael first, and then if Michael, feel free to pass that on to one of our other experts. When will the new compliance policies be in the portal? Are you able to talk to compliance policies?
Ooh, good question. No, sorry, I'm not sure of the exact date when those are going to become available. Hopefully someone else can jump in there.
I can take that. I believe the
Thanks,
gentleman over
Amit.
there, no problem, or whoever over there is probably referring to custom compliance policies that we are bringing in that Brad was talking about, where now you can go ahead and define your own settings that can then be used as compliance policies. So that's coming up soon. Just again, keep a watch on what's new on Intune.
Thanks so much. We have a question from John S. about CM Pivot. Are there plans in the future to port tenant attached features such as CM Pivot for non-tenant attached Intune managed devices? And I'm going to go to Danny on that one first. And if anyone else wants to jump in after Danny, feel free to do that.
Joe, read me that question again.
Are there
Something
any
about CM Pivot?
plans? Yep. Are there any plans in the future to port tenant attached features such as CM Pivot for non-tenant attached Intune managed devices?
Something we've thought about, but there's going to be a lot of challenges with that. So I won't necessarily put a time frame on it, but it's something we've thought about and no more really than that.
Is there anyone that wants to add to that while I look for another question? No? Okay, I'll just find another question. While I look for a question that hasn't been answered yet, Colleen, we've made a lot of announcements on Microsoft on Edge yesterday, and we'll be making some. If you haven't looked at those sessions yet today, we have made some announcements on Edge. Can you share some of those announcements?
Yeah, I think the biggest one we saw that Satya spoke about yesterday is Linux for Edge. This is a huge piece of feedback that we got when we launched the new Edge on Chromium, and so that will ship in the dev channel preview in the October timeframe. So that is coming. Endpoint data loss prevention, that is in preview now, should GA very soon. So this allows for, enterprises to help control the security of their data, information, that type of thing. And one thing that we are working on with our partners in Intune, especially in this new work from anywhere environment, is the ability for IT admins to manage personal devices while still keeping everyone protected using endpoint DLP. So that's a future piece of feature that's coming. But we have a lot of videos on aka.ms/edge YouTube. We have about 12 deep dive videos in all sorts of different areas. Rollback is coming. That was another top piece of piece of feedback from folks, being able to roll back to previous version. So these videos will help you. They're about 10 to 15 minutes, so easily consumable, help you do a deep dive into all sorts of different areas within the browser. There's also a video on the Ignite website, state of the browser. So if you want a high level overview of absolutely everything, then that one will help you. So lots of announcements. Thanks,
Great, thanks.
Joe.
Well, thanks. We'll be sure to add some of those links into the QA. I have a question here from LPM Automation that I'm going to read out loud, and I believe Michael can answer this one. And this is from yesterday, where we closed the meeting before we actually got a chance to answer it. It was either asked later or we didn't see it on time. One question from yesterday about Endpoint Analytics. For Endpoint Analytics, can you escrow from Configuration Manager? Oh, if you escrow from Configuration Manager, can you get analytical data from pre-version 1903 devices?
No, we can't. So not from pre-1903 devices. So the minimum bar for at least analytical data for startup and core boot time insights is 1903 and above. However, you can push proactive remediation packages to those clients that are pre-1903.
So you can push the proactive remediation scripts, but you don't get the analytical data?
Yeah, so not the core analytical data of the actual boot startup times. I believe the actual diag track, the service that's required, doesn't have the required hooks, the required code pre-1903.
All right, cool. Thanks for that. I have a question from Nicholas about Autopilot and Configuration Manager features. I'm going to push this over to Danny. Can you describe the Autopilot plus Config Manager feature integration that we just announced in a little bit more detail? Brad does talk about how we can use task sequences within Autopilot now. Will it start in a task sequence, and are there any steps that need to be included in it? Danny, you're on mute right now. Thanks.
Mute challenge. Yeah, so whenever you go to configure your Autopilot profile, there'll be a pill that you'll be able to slide to basically install the Configuration Manager agent on your device that autopilots. And that's basically the way you would autopilot into Configuration Manager. And then there are some options whenever you fill in the properties box that will let you execute a specific task sequence. So you'll be able to run a task sequence over the air through your CFG if that's the way you choose to manage your policy. So then you'll be able to get all your content and policy from either your CMG and or your cloud distribution point.
Great, thanks. I have a question here from Anonymous, asking a lot of questions today. This one's for Amit. Will there be, and Peter did answer it as I was getting ready to ask it, but since I've queued that one up in my brain, I'm going to ask it out loud anyway. Would there be a work and private profile separation in iOS the same way there is in Android Enterprise?
Yes, so right now we have similar technology to Android work profile in iOS that is supported by Apple and us, called as user enrollment, which is essentially targeted towards BYOD landscape that provides the separation between work and personal space. So that has already been released as of last Ignite and is available for customers to try on. And we are looking at making improvements as we progress in that area.
Thanks so much. And I'm just going to follow up on that. I know Android Enterprise does do that, and that's Android Enterprise doing it, not Android device itself, and even not even configure Intune. Is that the same with iOS, where we're relying on Apple to make some changes? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a functionality that's provided in the OS that we are essentially lighting up and delivering the capability.
All right, thanks. I have a question here I'm going to ask for Chris. We have a single, it's about Windows Hello for Business, so feel free to pass that along to one of our other SMEs. We have a single on-premises domain where endpoints are still managed by Configuration Manager. However, some of our departments have their own Azure 365 tenants. This has prevented us from enabling Windows Hello for Business to muddy waters. Our digital strategy is also hijacked out of our main MDM authority with VMware Workspace 1. Are there any plans to allow multi-tenant and multi-MDM authority abilities? I think that's the crux of the question. Are there any plans to allow multi-tenant and multi-MDM authorities?
That's a really good question, and to be honest, Joe, I don't know the answer to that one in terms of those plans. I have to talk to someone from any expertise. I don't know if anyone else on the panel is familiar with those plans.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any plans to allow the multiple MDM authorities. I think the authority itself, it speaks to the fact that the one MDM is the authority, right? Just like same thing with co-management, where either Configuration Manager is the authority for this workload or Intune is the authority. Any integration with VMware, I'm not sure how that would actually play nice together. And I have not heard any plans to have multiple MDM authorities there. I have a question also. I'm going to pass this one over to Amit. When will the compliance checks, the compliance check options in Intune for macOS be expanded to include checks on MDAV and the device security status are propagated from ATP?
Right, Joe. I think that question is a really great question and something that we've been hearing from our customers. So short answer is, it is something that is in our backlog and the feature team is working on it. We don't have a specific date, but do keep a watch on the what's new section and the doc on Intune, and we will be publishing the information there. But just be aware, it is something that we are working on.
Great, thanks so much for that. I have a question from John S. about Microsoft 365 Lighthouse. Lighthouse is a brand new feature that we just announced during Brad's session. And I'm going to ask this one of Michael first, and then we'll see about the rest of the panel. Again, it is a brand new feature, so we'll see what we know. Will Microsoft 365 Lighthouse allow us to import and export Microsoft Endpoint Manager configuration profiles cross-tenant?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as far as I know, Lighthouse is specifically for the visibility of multiple tenants that you may have ownership over. So say if you're an MSP and you manage multiple different customers, just being able to get a quick view via Lighthouse about the current status of those individual tenants. Specifically about importing and exporting configuration data between tenants though, definitely have a look at the Graph API. So I've got a number of customers at the moment that are querying Graph API to pull the configuration data, the configuration profiles out of one tenant and then deploying it into another tenant.
Yeah, that's a good point. We see that a lot with our customers that are going from a test or that kind of a tenant into their prod tenant, where they're using the Graph API to move those policies over. Great point there. So I have another question from John S. I'm going to ask this of Chris. Will there be options to configure group policy preferences in Endpoint Manager? For example, for configuring registry keys or drive mappings, easier on Intune managed devices without falling back to PowerShell scripts. You know, we're constantly importing ADMX files. How about group policy preferences?
Yeah, that's so I don't know the specifics of group policy preferences all up. I do know specifically for Microsoft Edge, which is an area that we've been investing in, where that has the two different ADMXs that will control over what's going to be enforced and what can the user override. And that is already live and supported in MEM today. I'm not aware of plans for additional group policy preferences. I'm not sure if anyone else in the panel is. I know the browser space.
All right, thanks for that. I'm also not aware of any plans for group policy preferences. And as they asked in the question, as John asked, I would use PowerShell scripts for those drive mappings personally, and possibly at some point in the future we'll do something like that in Intune, but it's nothing we've been talking about so far today. I have a question here I'm going to ask Danny. Active Directory has the benefit of a hierarchical structure, while Azure Active Directory is flat. With Configuration Manager, we have a lot of granularity with creating user and device groups, task sequencing, OS upgrade, Pixie boot. With Intune, we have very limited controls, making it harder. What is Microsoft's recommendation for enterprises to address a remote workforce with regards to software updates, OS upgrades, PC re-imaging? I know it's a loaded question, so thanks for your answer. It's a long question. I wish I could get a link to it or post it on the window for you to read.
So there'll be a blog that will literally allude to this, and it's called The Big Three. We're going to be publishing it here pretty soon. Quick answer though, I would say I love the question, and I implore the thought that was put into it, because you're looking at really what you have and how to actually transform that, right? It's not a migration, it's more of a transformation. So when you look at that transformation, you think of all those things that you just mentioned. The easiest way and the simplest way, even if I was an IT director again today, I would absolutely take my config man and tenant attach it and start deploying my configuration manager from the cloud, i.e. Intune. Reason being that when I deploy that configuration manager agent from the cloud, I can manage devices no matter what domain they're on, no matter if they're on a domain or not, so work group or domain joined. So that gives you some immediate flexibility and doesn't even add complexity to what you're already doing. So you're already deploying software updates, you're already deploying group policies or like group policy configuration items and baselines and doing, so you already got this workflow built up in Configuration Manager. I mean, the easiest way to actually do it is just to drop a CMG, deploy your Configuration Manager agent from the cloud. None of your workflows change. And then you get the dynamic and really robust grouping within Configuration Manager. And then if you wanted to, again, more invigorate that some more, you could take those collections that you built in Configuration Manager and send them to the cloud at Azure AD groups. So now you get this really enriched, broad set of features and value with little to no effort and almost no risk. So
great, thanks for that.
Long way to answer that question.
Yep, thanks. We lost the slide, so everyone's camera that's on, just wave to say hello, because everyone can see everyone at the same time right now. Colleen, I'm going to go ahead and ask you this question. I see that you already answered in the chat, but it's a pretty good question. And I apologize if I mispronounced your name. It looks like Shuchi asked this question: is conditional access supported with Edge? In other words, will Microsoft Edge launch on compliant devices?
Yes, absolutely, natively. No extensions or plugins needed, and I did provide a link to the documentation. We are all set on CA.
Great, thanks for that. And I'm actually told that we were sharing a slide, and we're all working from home, so apologies, but our friend that was sharing a slide lost internet access, and so hopefully that'll come back soon. We all have it, we just don't have the slide to show you right now. I have a question. I'm going to go ahead and ask, I think Michael first, and then we'll pass that along. It might be, based on the time, it might be our last question. This is from Rob, who's asked us a couple of questions, so thank you, Rob, for joining us today. Talking about Linux, are there plans to manage Linux devices from Endpoint Manager? I don't have a use case myself, but could imagine a customer of ours would come up with that question, how to manage these devices.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I don't know if I've got anything to share on that at the moment, but I will definitely take your feedback on board internally inside of the team, for sure. I definitely hear that from another customer that I'm engaged with, that it just seems like the logical choice. So they're already managing Windows devices and iOS devices. What about Linux? So yeah, very good question.
Hey, look, we got our internet back. Thanks, Michael, for that. Yeah, we do get a lot of questions about supporting Linux on Endpoint Manager, and Linux is, it's something that we have a lot of focus on right now ourselves. Anonymous has asked us another question. I'm going to ask Chris, is there any possibility of built-in function in Intune for email alerts on malware detection events without having ATP or Graph API engineering?
I actually heard a very similar question to that in the last session. And
that's why I came to you for this one.
Perfect. Yeah. So what I would say, I mean, that we don't have any deep plans on that today. And in general, the thing to think about is that that's kind of the functionality that we would look to, the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, recently rebranded. I've got to now relearn all of the things to remember. But that's, where you're going to get the value from that, because if looking at just purely on what's happening on the endpoint, just forwarding on via email a number of alerts that come in from the AV, isn't really going to bring you the equivalency to having something like an EDR solution. So from an all-up security perspective, really getting to that, sort of E5 level Defender for Endpoint solution that's going to consolidate, group those alerts together into incidents and really tell a story more powerfully is the direction we're going in, as opposed to, kind of one-off doing some email forwarding for a reasonably small subset of the full security stack and kind of hoping that will be enough. So, I would say that's not something that we're actively planning on, but instead looking to, our Defender for Endpoint to provide a more rich and robust solution for that set of requirements.
Thanks so much for that. We have one more question here, which lives in my heart. It's already been answered, but I'm going to go ahead and read it out loud. And I think that'll be the last question of the morning. Currently, there are not any certifications available with regards to Configuration Manager, Endpoint Manager, and Intune. So can we expect new certifications on that area anytime? And I didn't introduce myself this way, but I am a Microsoft certified trainer, so I keep my certifications up to date. And Ronnie did answer this. The Modern Desktop 100 and 101 tests cover Endpoint Manager, and we do have the Microsoft 365 Administrator and Microsoft 365 Enterprise Administrator certifications out there for you. And those are the certifications that we recommend that you go after if you are an Intune, Configuration Manager, or all-out Microsoft 365 Administrator. And with that, I think we have about 5 seconds left. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. We had some great questions and a lot of participation. So thanks so much. We do have some links up on the screen for you, and enjoy the rest of Ignite.